Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CoinGeek weekly live stream. I am your host, Mr. Kurt Wuckert Jr., rocking live from sunny South Florida. It's finally getting a little sunny again. Our winter was almost 3 weeks long and hit 40 degrees once, so it's been a little rough. Hope everybody's doing well. So our guest today, I'm normally I would talk for 5 to 7 minutes about a whole bunch of stuff that pleases me, but instead, I think Connor has a pretty hard stop in the middle of the show, so I'm going to save my nonsense for after Connor has to take off, and then we'll talk about questions, comments, blessings, cursings, grapes, or gropes, and something of a nightmare that I had over the weekend that I think a couple of you are probably aware of, but some of you will be interested to learn about. So everything's fine, I think, but we'll find out. So first, please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell. Thank you to our sponsors, Rock Wallet, Champions, TCG, all of you, the watchers, all the lovely people, all this jazz and whatnot. But we're going to play the ad, come back with Connor Murray, and we will be right back. Connor, you're muted, sir. Hey, how you doing, man?
Good. How's it going?
Yeah, but I'm okay. It's been a long weekend, and so far been a long week. It feels like it's been a month this week. So, yeah. How are you?
Good. We had some good snow up here in South Carolina too. So it's been good to get some warm weather back at least.
Yeah, no, it's been I've just been like nonstop sick since the beginning of the year, so I'm consistently like mild ear infection, mild sinus thing, like my lungs are a little so I'm not grand, but I'm okay. So
you're gonna hear me blow my nose a few times, so
that's fine, totally fine. I'm on I take a shot of Afrin before doing the show every Tuesday this year so far, so I'm nightmare. So you have a hard stop at 2:30 too, right? Just to be clear.
Yeah,
okay, cool. All right. So I would love to take questions from the audience. So anybody in the troll box who has questions about BSV in specific, broad blockchain ecosystem stuff, BSVA. Connor, you are the director of stewardship over at BSVA, which is a role that I think a lot of people misunderstand or dislike because why does Bitcoin need a steward, bro? But Maybe we could start there. Why does Bitcoin need a steward, bro? So, Connor, if you could give us your version of that answer, I would be pleased to start there.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll try to speak for everybody, although maybe I'm just speaking for myself. But a core philosophy of BSV is that the protocol should be set in stone. And there should be no single person or entity that has the power to change it, right? So the one example I always give is like the 21 million coin supply limit, right? So the Bitcoin white paper doesn't actually specify how many coins there are in the system.
Yep.
It does say that it's a fixed supply, but the 21 million coin supply was just like a arbitrary constant set in the original source code. And from a holistic view, like everyone in BSV all agrees, right? The protocol is set in stone. We're not going to change it. So all we did was set up the association to act as the steward of the protocol. And all that really means is, number one, being some kind of central source of information for like what the protocol actually is. So we documented the protocol. It's at protocol.bsvblockchain.org. And then, my job is really quite simple. It's to make sure nothing changes. But also, I'll throw a plug in the fact that we do have one last update to restore the original protocol. So in my mind, stewardship is also maintaining it being locked, but also taking on the burden of ensuring we get back to the original protocol, which was the mandate from BSV when we started this. And I'll give a plug the fact that we actually have a town hall tomorrow where we're going to go over the current state of that Chronicle update, and I can talk about it a little bit today too.
Cool.
Encourage everyone to join that tomorrow if you are available to.
Yeah. So I know one of the things, because me and you have talked about it, it's been a while, but figuring out like what the hell is the protocol is a question that I think a lot of people, because I mean, this is super screwed up in the small blocker world where it's like, well, the software is the protocol. It's if you change the protocol, you change the software, you change the rules, and community consensus decides what is Bitcoin. And that's kind of the zeitgeist that we are starting with. That's kind of the basic assumption from the general culture. So, and I know this is a little bit of a struggle for you and some other key people in figuring out, okay, if the protocol is set in stone fundamentally, what things are the protocol? So I know one of the things that was discussed was like database management. So there was, Berkeley DB versus moving to some other thing. Like, okay, is that a protocol change or is that an implementation decision? And then same with like the difficulty adjustment, which I think is the primary thing coming in Chronicle as I understand it. But can you walk me through the thought process on what is the protocol and how did you come to a conclusion on that definition?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the disclaimer that I'm just a human, right? So I've been wrong, and I probably will continue to be wrong.
This
so
disappoints me.
Right. All we did was basically, we sat down and we came up with one guiding North Star, which I think to me made the most sense, which is the association does offer node software, right? We have the SV node software, and we're building Teranode. And this was relevant to the fact that we were building Teranode, but the idea that I use as a North Star was like, if someone came in from scratch and wanted to build their own node implementation, what is like the minimum required documentation that they would need to communicate with the other nodes in the network, right? And all of those pieces basically were the protocol, right? So, so for instance, right, because this is one of the things that's come up with Teranode, like the block structure itself, right? The block structure itself is part of the protocol, but how you build the block might not be part of the protocol, right? So this idea of having subtrees and communicating subtrees, that's not a protocol change because you're just changing the way that the node software is building the block, but you're not actually changing the block structure itself. And so that's like one small example, but and then things like that 21 million coin supply, right? Like where is that defined? It literally was just defined. There was no paper that said that
in the software. Yeah.
Yeah. So things like that. But I kind of use it as a guiding North Star to say like, okay, if I was to build something from scratch, what are the things that I have to be, like what are the core things that have to be in the software for this to communicate with the existing nodes of the network? And kind of using that to then say like, using that as a guiding North Star to me was the easiest way to say like, what is the actual core protocol? But yeah, it's still a challenge to fully get everyone to agree on what that actually is or what we all think it is. But yeah. I think we're pretty close. And I also encourage, with the caveat that I am human and everyone at the association is human, everyone is welcome to look at the existing protocol documentation, and any feedback that we get is more than welcome.
Yeah, so. No, I like that. So here's a really good question. What does Connor do if someone does try to change the protocol? And what, in practical terms, what does that look like? Bringing in a proprietary node implementation and 60% of hash power, is that, like what is the basic response to that? Is that something that's clearly defined, or who makes that call?
So I don't do anything, right? I mean, it's a distributed network of nodes, and all that we do is define what the network is, and the network is something that does not change. The protocol doesn't change. And if someone tries to change the protocol, we would expect there to be a remaining honest network which rejects blocks that are built with a changed protocol, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to kind of remember. I try to use these examples, but remember, you have to always think back to like the original Bitcoin release, Satoshi was the steward of Bitcoin. And when Satoshi had to update the software to fix like the value overflow incident, for instance, that was him centrally managing a distributed network, right? But the network is still distributed, but there is that central steward that says, hey, by the way, these guys are working on a chain that is broken, right? And it's a change protocol. Right. In the same way, when the association had to basically just put out some kind of notice back when there was that giant double spend 50% attack thing, right? The association can help tell people, like coordinate the nodes, but the nodes have to do that coordination themselves. And it's their responsibility per the white paper to reject malicious activity, and changing the protocol is what we would define as malicious activity. So I hope that answered the question.
No, I think it's a good answer. And in fact, it's funny. I talk about the 2010, centrally planned reorg, or centrally managed reorg, and then the 2013 centrally managed reorg, which that one was primarily managed by Peter Wella from Bitcoin Core. And so, and in both instances, it's funny, I've talked about them. Kurt, I've had people say, Kurt, you're like, why are you criticizing what Peter did? Like it totally, and it was like, I'm not criticizing it. It's just a thing that happened that needs to be discussed. I actually think he made the right decision in that the chain with the longest proof of work, or the longest chain with the most proof of work, was actually the invalid chain because of various reasons. And, we don't want to get too deep into the weeds on that, but ultimately it was a good thing that Peter saw what happened and made a decision to fall back onto the principles that underlie Bitcoin rather than the single principle of the longest chain with the most proof of work, which is what Gavin Andreessen was advocating for. Actually, Gavin in that situation was like, hey man, Bitcoin is whichever chain is the longest chain with most proof of work. And I think Peter took the more nuanced and actually the right decision in that circumstance. Not to say that he couldn't have been wrong, but I think that there's actually a lot of wisdom and instructive thought that goes into this process that, hey, under pressure, we can't just decide, and this is something that I think should be really clear, but if everybody on Earth wants to change gold, you can't change gold. The only thing that you can do is decide that some other thing should be called gold, but that doesn't undermine the principle of this thing that was gold yesterday. It's still the same atomic properties. It's the same thing as it was yesterday, even if you've decided to go through a naming convention change. And that's ultimately what I think has happened in Bitcoin, is that BTC has changed its underlying fundamentals that make it or made it Bitcoin, but they have kept to the naming convention. So they created a new thing, said this new thing is Bitcoin, and we're going to keep moving forward with it. And so I think it's a very difficult position to be in, especially because you're talking about a lot of values. Like these are not things that people are passé about. Like these are things that people are extremely passionate about. We're like religiously passionate about in many regards. So I'll
add like one thing to that too. And I can't remember if this is in the white paper or if Satoshi wrote this separately, but the whole idea of like a 51% attack, which is what I would call changing the protocol, right? If we say what is changing the protocol, it means someone with a lot of hash power has decided to, let's say they inflate the coin supply or something like that, right? It was even written from the very beginning that even if someone is able to acquire a majority hash rate and perform malicious activity, it does not subject the system to arbitrary changes, because it would expect the honest nodes to reject that either way. So like even this idea that the longest chain of hash power, regardless of anything that they're doing, wins, it is rejected from the very beginning of the system anyway. And then I just want to add to, I'll give a highlight. What else do we do if this happens, right? That's also why we re-enabled the alert system, which right now is kind of a separate sidecar to the node software, but it'll be baked into Teranode. But we can also use the alert system to alert nodes if something is happening, right? Because we also do monitoring and things like that. So I also wanted to give a plug for that too.
Sure. Well, and this is something actually that I think any normal person understands, and principally that we agree with when it happens in other circumstances. And I think the best example of this is like the Nazi party control of like France and Poland and some of these things. Like when the Nazis took over France and Poland and a few other places, they installed new governments that were, the official government of these places, but the real government of those places actually just ruled from exile. So they were having a sort of, there was a valid French government and there was an invalid French government. And the invalid French government had the full power of the Wehrmacht on their side. So there was a better part of a decade where it was like, well, don't say anything bad about the powerful people. But ultimately, come 1945 into 1946, the real government got reinstalled back into France and well, not Poland right away, but some of these places, and actually Poland's took another 40 plus years, 45 years before the actual Polish government got reinstalled, because there was a second, the USSR took over Poland after. But even then, there was a real Polish successionary government that was operating for the quote unquote real Polish people, that as soon as the USSR fell, there was an instant reinstallation of the valid Polish government. And so it's actually the same principle that under pressure, like, yes, 51% attack or, a giant military power may show up and put a gun in your face. And it's, if you weren't prepared for it, you may just have to say, yeah, okay, I'll pay my taxes to you for now. But ultimately, they are still an invalid oppressor, and people understand that they are the invalid oppressor and that you have the right to return to essentially the original protocol of your nation and your people and those kind of things. So I think principally there's a really good example to draw there as well. So we got Mr. Producer, who will remain anonymous for the moment. But if you want to pull up a couple more of these questions here, we got Connor for another 13 minutes. So let's snag a few good ones. And also the comment of the day, or question comment of the day, will receive a free pack of cards from Champions TCG, courtesy of the Champions TCG sponsorship. So let's throw up another question here. Is there a date certain for the Chronicle release? Also, Simply Cash and Electrum SV are no longer actively developer supported. Any possibility that the Chronicle release will break those wallets? That's quite a good question. Connor, any thoughts?
Yeah, really good question. So again, I realized earlier I said the town hall is tomorrow. It's actually Thursday. My brain is mixed up. But I'll answer both questions. So I actually thought we would have released this already. The plan was last quarter. But I'll try not to go into all the detail, but I can if you want me to. We put out a private release to a few people just to get some feedback on it. And the issue of transaction malleability came up. And transaction malleability is basically the idea that if I give you, if I give you a transaction, are there sources of malleability in the transaction where you could alter the transaction ID prior to the transaction getting mined in a block? So the BTC developers spent a bunch of time coding a lot of things to remove any sources of transaction malleability from the system. So one example would be the easiest example is you used to be able to put unlocking codes in the opcodes in the unlocking script. But what that means is that someone could just add like a op drop, op push op drop to the unlocking script, and then ultimately the transaction ID gets changed. And they really believe that miners themselves, the BTC philosophy is that miners are evil, and for whatever reason, miners both secure the system but are also like the biggest attack vector in the system, and it's very contradictory. Yep. So actual sources of transaction malleability are pretty much limited to the recipient of a transaction prior to broadcast or miners themselves. So long story short, you talk to like 8,000 developers, you'll get 8,001 opinions about transaction malleability.
Yep.
I have my own opinion on it, which I'm happy to share, but regardless, a few of the changes in the Chronicle release were going to reintroduce malleability to the system. And there's a lot of concern from a few different people and businesses that didn't want that to happen. So we came up with a much more conservative approach where, again, forgive me for just like throwing details out here without it being spelled out, but it will be spelled out in public in a couple of days.
Yeah. Yep.
which is, so if you are also aware, when we forked away from, when Bitcoin Cash emerged from BTC, they also changed the digest algorithm to the BIP 143 digest algorithm, which is also the digest algorithm used by SegWit in BTC, where we're storing the original transaction digest algorithm, which also then introduces sources of malleability. So what we're going to do is actually give people the choice on what they want to do. So they can either use the original digest algorithm and deal with the realities of transaction malleability, which I would argue aren't really a concern. But if someone believes they're a concern, then they can keep signing transactions the way they're doing it right now. Nothing will change for them. And this is kind of like in the interest of stability on our side and backwards compatibility for everything. They can keep signing with the fork ID flag using this BIP 143 digest algorithm. No sources of malleability, things won't stay the same. So that was like a lot of the kind of back and forth of, we didn't want to mess things up for a lot of people, but we also found it really important to restore the original. Because you think about it, it's also really weird, for the last 6 years or whatever, we've lived with the reality that we changed what information was being signed in a transaction, which is not a minimal change, right?
Right.
So anyway, all that's to say, right now, assuming nothing else changes, the development is complete, and we will put a release candidate out soon. And then the question is, when do we activate this change? Because it will be a hard fork, because we're also restoring the remaining opcodes like opver. There is no activation date set right now, but we want to give enough lead time for exchanges and wallets to update. So to answer the second question, nothing will break for any wallets that use our open source libraries, because that will all be built into it off the bat. But it may take some time for wallets like Simply Cash and Electrum SV to update if they want to use the new opcodes and things like that. So nothing should break, but they may want to update if you want to be able to use those opcodes and be compatible.
So that makes sense. So presuming you don't make a transaction that uses the quote unquote breaking change, new rules or old rules or whatever. Which is common. Like, just because there is a node change like that, if you don't change what you do, similar to when the network split in 2018, like the way to actually split your coins required sending dust that had use of one of the new opcodes or something, right? So question from Robin Smith. What happens when someone changes the protocol? BSVA sees it but ignores it, and all nodes ignore it too. So I'll just say from my standpoint, like as a node operator, like Gorilla Pool, we're monitoring for malicious activity ourselves. So if something, like, we would get a red flag if something fishy happens, and we would, flag it and try to make contact with the other people right away, and then fundamentally move away from it. And these were discussions that we had, when the empty block miner started to become an issue. I'm of the opinion the empty block miner was just a person or just a company doing, acting rationally. But I think when their behavior started to become problematic for the network, whether malicious or not, I think it actually was our job to start to make a decision about, like, hey, do we just start to refuse to build on their blocks, because it's our job to make sure the network is, works for everybody. So that would be how I would treat it. Connor, do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we don't mind, right? I mean, the association isn't, like, we're not changing the consensus mechanism of Bitcoin to include the association at all, right? But we do act to preserve this technology, and if someone changes the protocol and 99% of the global SHA-256 hash rate mines it, then we're going to find the last 1% to mine our chain, right? We basically just act as the advocate for the original protocol. And so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to hope that someone mines the honest chain, and we'll help coordinate that, the software that would do that, and all that kind of stuff, right? I just want to make sure it's clear, what our actual role is, which is just to kind of be a steward, not a decision maker.
Quick quick response. Did Connor say there's a hard fork coming? Is this similar to 2018? Is there a new coin?
No, there's not a new coin. It's similar to the Genesis update, right? So, and remember, this Chronicle update has kind of been promised since 2020 with Genesis. But yes, there's one final hard fork, but it's really just a mandatory update to restore the last bits of the original protocol, and then thank God we will never have to touch the protocol ever again, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, what a journey. We got probably time for 2 or 3 more questions if we're pretty quick here. Did the original Bitcoin protocol from 2009 have a limit on block size? If so, was it always the plan to open that up depending on demand, or was that the only change that was anticipated?
Well, the very original had no block size cap at all. It was introduced because of concerns from Hal Finney and Ray Dillinger, I think, to address like a possible DDoS attack, like a spam attack, because the network was so small. So Satoshi added the block size limit with a forum post saying that once demand grew, that they could increase it over time. Unfortunately, a group of people decided that the system worked better by never changing that at all. But it was always the intention from the beginning that there was no consensus rule on block size, and instead miners should just build blocks that make sense and tending towards an unbounded block size.
Yep. I should also point out that making the change similar to what you're talking about as Chronicle is actually, this is how Satoshi told people in the Bitcoin forums to do it. So yeah, when you need to make a change, you just create a flag day and you issue the software and everybody upgrades and then you move forward. So he described a hard fork in the sense that you just described a hard fork with Chronicle. So this is actually the Satoshi vision for how to make Bitcoin work when a change is necessary. So that's yeah. Next question. What is the significance of the stable coins coming to BSV? Yeah, what are your thoughts? There's imminent debut of money. MNEE has been marketing pretty hard across social media, so that seems to be coming soon. What do you think?
I think it's probably the biggest thing that's been missing for us. I mean, just speaking from a US perspective, especially, right? I think end users don't really care about BSV. They don't care about like crypto coin 1 versus crypto coin 2, to be honest with you. So I think making the user experience as familiar as possible to make it feel like someone is receiving US dollar, but being able to leverage micropayments and all the great stuff that BSV enables is probably the best thing for an end user perspective. Even though, with all that said, you know, I'm a Hayek fan at heart, and I do believe a money separate from the US dollar might be the best path forward anyway. And that's why I got into this space to begin with. But I think stablecoins are important and have a role to play, especially in adoption.
Yep. Where and when is the town hall and what topic? Yeah, I have not seen anything about it, so the marketing needs to be stepped up a little bit on these kind of things.
Yeah, there should be an email going out like right now or later today. But it's on Thursday at, let me check my calendar. And it'll be recorded so everyone can look at it. But Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And I'm happy to do more of them too. The goal is just to get as many smart people to tune in and provide us feedback, because like I said, we don't want to work in a vacuum, and we want to make sure that we're doing things smart and stable.
For sure. So we have less than a minute. Actually, it is now 2:30. So Connor, you said hard stop. So if you'd like to have the final word here, I'd be happy to give you the final word and let you go.
No, sorry, I have to run to an appointment. So thanks for having me, Kurt, and good seeing you again. And hopefully everyone can join us on Thursday, and I'm happy to keep providing some updates on all this. So
yeah, looking forward to it. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right. Yeah. Take care. So, all right, let's I'll keep taking these questions. So anybody that's got more questions about Bitcoin generically, or BSV in specific, or the blockchain universe, or anything else that you want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about it. What's a great use case example for Opver, and what kinds of new peer-to-peer operations can be enabled through its use? So Good question, because as far as I'm aware, a completely unused opcode in the entire history of Bitcoin. But in my research of it, and it's been a little bit, so I'd have to brush up. But looking at opver, it struck me as a way to essentially bootstrap a altcoin. Is probably not the right word because of the connotations of the word altcoin at this point, but basically you could have versions. So when you create a transaction that creates a new version or like a new colored coin conceptually, that you could use it for some special purpose. So let's say you're having a special event, and special event has specific tokens. So the way that I saw it when I researched how it could work, and again, this is coming from no experience because nobody has experience with how this works. Literally only theory on how it could or should be used. It struck me as a way to bootstrap essentially a limited version token, or to have different versions of the network that had different properties. So, which I guess is another way to say, like, you're creating like a temporary altcoin. But imagine if you wanted to use a version of Bitcoin that used like ring signatures and ZK snarks for some purpose, right? In theory, you could use opver to create a like subchain is also probably not the right word. Again, speaking from no experience, but it's essentially a way to just create a new version of the network for some special use, presumably in limited supply, but in theory like forever, but still using the same network dynamics and technically on the same network itself. So it's I don't know, it's actually, here's a response from Dean Little here, who's kind of saying the same thing. Opver is a way to create a hard fork because every node version would yield a different result. Yeah, so it's I don't know. It's one of those things that has not been explored because it's never been used. But ultimately, yeah, it's I guess we'll see. So describe the difference between a soft and hard fork. Okay, so hard forks are a way to change rules in the network that are no longer backward compatible. Okay, backward or forward compatible. So you are essentially, and this could be the simplest of changes, meaning a comma in the wrong spot on new node, or if old node does not understand the rules of new node, they split forever. And either everyone follows old node or everyone follows new node, or partials follow both versions, and you have like quote unquote new coins on new network. That would be a hard fork. A soft fork works a little more like malware, in that what you're doing is you are telling old nodes, trust me, bro. So you're creating a script that tells old nodes that like, my signature says that you don't need to validate the thing that you don't understand. You just trust that the new nodes are doing the right thing and you follow those forever. So it stops old nodes from being able to invalidate new changes in order to make sure that no matter what, there is no split. And this is conceptually something that the small blockers came up with in Bitcoin in order to make sure that they do not lose node count when they make the changes that they want to make. So something like SegWit or Taproot or RBF and lots of other changes would have and should have created a new network, but they love the idea of a network that is passively validated. So if you just, you installed Bitcoin Core on your mom's boyfriend's computer 6 years ago, and it's just there listening to the network and validating transactions, it will not get kicked off the network if it does not go through your contentious upgrade. So if you can push it through as a soft fork, it literally just lies to the legacy node and says, if it's a valid Bitcoin transaction, cool, it's valid. But if it's invalid and has my signature, it's a trust me, bro. So old nodes do the trust me, bro validation going forward, and only quote unquote new nodes can validate new transactions. So essentially, if you're not running the very newest version of the network node, you're essentially just running a light wallet of various rapport. So I hope that explains it. There's a lot more to it. You could get really technical into the how and why and whatever, but that's probably the best way to distill it down. What's your take on the recent actions of the new U.S. administration? Well, it depends which actions. while principally I like a lot of the things that I'm seeing and principally dislike some of the things that I'm seeing too, the overarching principle for me is that I do not like executive orders. And so I understand why they exist. And I understand that because they exist, it makes sense to use them when you become a new executive and you think that things are, need rapid change. But the quote unquote need for rapid change is a really, really scary thing to put into the hands of somebody who's powerful. So even again, if I principally like the product of change, the way that the change occurs is something that, continues to set precedents. So Donald Trump coming into office and jamming through lots of executive orders, just as a concept is a bad concept, because when the next president shows up and I really don't like the ideas of that president and they're like, cool, here's my, first 100 days and 1,000 executive orders, like rapid change of the country is a fundamentally dangerous thing. Even if the product of it ends up being, net good for me or net good for somebody, it's a dangerous precedent to set. So I don't like it for that reason. Also, while I think there are lots of good things coming because of the nature of deregulation in the blockchain space, I think this does make the United States more competitive. Talking about getting rid of capital gains tax for projects that are occurring in the United States. That's a good thing. Like, it would be good for engineers not to feel like, all right, do I need to go to Singapore or Malta or Gibraltar in order to work in the blockchain space? Like, we have a lot of Americans that live in Dubai because of the tax situation. And it would be good if they were setting up in places like Palm Beach, Florida instead. Like, I like that idea. So there's stuff like that I think is good. But then, the other, like this strategic reserve, I think the strategic reserve is just about the dumbest thing that anybody could want. If anybody knows the history of strategic reserves and why they even exist in the first place, would see that as a fundamentally bad thing. So I'm going to give a quick example. We used to use gold as money. I would have a bag of gold coins in my life that I would use to pay for things. I would receive change back in gold coin or silver or whatever, but I had precious metal that had a certain amount of purchasing power that was very smooth and predictable over time. And I could use that money the way that I saw fit. Now, when it became impractical for me to keep that money myself, then I may give it to a bank. But as the bank issues me credit based on my deposit, it gives them the ability to debase the asset and give me quote unquote dollars, which used to be known. It was a known weight value of your precious metals. So it was redeemable. So I could take my paper back and get my coins back and this kind of thing. Like it had an exchange rate that was well known and frequently used. But all it really takes is a generation of people that grew up only using the paper money, only the derivative, to think that a dollar is just a dollar. So my dollar is a dollar's worth of purchasing power. So I have abstracted away any concept of sound money. And since that's completely abstracted away, then it allows the money to be debased in an increasing basis going forward. We don't need this in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is fundamentally a sound money designed to be used as cash, the way that gold could have been used as cash. So imagine you have an asset that has a known value and it has no friction because it's magic internet money. That's an incredible tool. Putting it in a strategic reserve, especially a strategic reserve for the government or by the government or the central banks, should strike everyone as an insane leap, because what that does is it allows the government and the central banks to issue derivative assets and debase the value of the underlying currency. This is the only reason to do that. Well, there's two reasons, actually. The reason why we would have like a strategic oil reserve, for example, is that, like, hey, if we suddenly go to war with Russia and China, or if there's suddenly some massive supply shock in the oil supply, the United States government needs to be able to release oil strategically back into the economy in order to win a war or deal with some major economic fallout or whatever. So the world needs oil, so we should have a strategic oil reserve. What I don't understand is why the world at all, I mean, other than the few thousand people who are like crypto traders, why do we need a strategic reserve of XRP, USDC, and I think Solana is what's going on? Now, sure, Trump coin and Melania coin are on Solana. So I guess if they need to inject emergency liquidity into, Trump and Melania or chick with dick or Joe Biden coin, like that's fine. I understand why Trump may want that strategic reserve, but I really don't like the idea going on there. And then my last point is that if the government has money to buy crypto, then that should be my money. That should be money that goes back to me and the people who are owed that money back. That money was taken from citizens, and I don't want my money invested into XRP or Solana or anything else. I would be opposed to a BSV strategic reserve, even though I really like BSV. So that's my thoughts. Recent actions on new U.S. administration. Some practical net good, but principally bad that a lot of it's coming by executive order. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I could talk about this for hours, so I'm gonna cut it there. Next question, please. There is a company or use case waiting for Chronicle update for release a new. I have no idea. I doubt it. The Chronicle upgrade is more about principally reestablishing and giving the world back Satoshi's vision. Like this has been the roadmap we've been on since before there was a split even into Bitcoin Cash. Like the people who care about Bitcoin fundamentally care about Satoshi's vision. We want to see Bitcoin as it was originally manifested, and not just because, like, this isn't just like, I don't know, let's see if it's a good idea. Like, that's a little bit of it, but principally we think it is a good idea. I believe that it is an idea that is better than what the world has come up with since, and I think the world deserves to at least give it a shot all the way. So that's it. Like, if Bitcoin is good, then trying Bitcoin all the way is really good, and that's really what underlies it. So let's do that. Is Bitcoin's price meant to go up? Meant to. I think it predictably will. So if you understand sound money, right? The purchasing power of a hard asset, a sound money system, especially in the face of otherwise bad politics and bad monetary policy, then you understand why it would go up. And this is the one thing that small blockers do really, really well, is that they take the sort of Mises, Hayek, and any number of these other people talking about just how screwed up monetization and all these things are in the world, and they've explained it really well. They are not wrong. My criticism to them is simply that all they're doing is regurgitating like Peter Schiff. Like, as much as they hate Peter Schiff has been saying the exact same thing about gold for 30, 40 years. And that is, it's true, but it's less true about Bitcoin than it is about gold. And I wish they would just admit that BTC is little more than a speculative asset. And, congratulations. I'm not criticizing it for that, to invest in BTC for the sake of making money. Like, it's a rational bet that people can make, and I think should make if it's something that they seem or they see fit to do with their own money. But it's not a Bitcoin principle fundamentally. So I think we should predict for the price of Bitcoin to go up as it continues to disrupt and undermine the economy, or undermine the sick parts of the economy. And I think that that's predictable, but meant to go up. I don't know. I don't know that we've seen that it was designed necessarily to absorb value. But it is a product, like anything that does a good job will absorb value anyways. So I don't know. Meant to is the hard part for me. Like, it's predictable that it will, but meant to, no, it is meant to be a payment system. And that's just kind of that's what it is and does and was meant to do. And other than that, if it's good at that, I think then it should be expected to go up in value. But meant to go up in value implies that it was created as an investment, and I don't think that that's necessarily the case. So I need to take a minor break here for my throat, so we're going to play an ad real quick, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds. I'll take a few more of your questions. Also, the comment of the day will receive a Champions TCG card pack that will be chosen between me and the producer. But I'd like to bang through a few more of these questions. There's a bunch of good ones here. So let's cut to ad, and we'll be right back.
Choose your hero. Aldrich Soyhammer, Divine Crusader.
The time is now, champion. To war!
Jesus the Risen.
Blessed be the cheddar.
Boris, Protector of Innocence.
I'm all natural.
Solrend, Scythe of the Damned.
Your soul is mine. No refunds.
Lilith, Princess of Hell.
Self-destruction is an art.
Wagyu, Tasty Samurai.
High-grade beef with a killer instinct.
Skibbity,
Skibbity.
Brain Rot Incarnate.
Skibbity dot dot.
Oh, that ad though. All right, let's take a few more questions. Let's rock through them, please. Bring up the questions. We have will BSV be widely known as the real, true, and only Bitcoin in 5 years, or has that ship sailed? Does it matter anymore? Do we need to keep calling BSV Bitcoin on the hope that things change? Why? I don't know. In my opinion, like BSV is clearly Bitcoin. The argument is a nuanced one, but it's kind of like, you know, I'm going to make a church analogy because I think it's the most apt. So you have ancient Hebrew religion, like what we think of today as Judaism. We have Catholicism and Orthodoxy. You have Protestant Christianity. You have things like Mormonism or like Jehovah's Witnesses. So these are all essentially forks in the chain, right? But in theory, we all believe in the same basic creator God. Let's throw Islam in there too, so everybody gets mad. And so if we believe that like there is a people of God and Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob, and all these things matter, and it's like, you know, 7,000 years of history or something, who are God's real people? Should be pretty straightforward question, right? But it's not. And the reason it's not is because every time you have a disagreement about sometimes big things like, is this guy the Messiah? Like that's pretty big disagreement in the history of things. And then there's things as simple as should we be playing the drums at church? And there's everything in the middle that have been reasons to form a new variation on the faith. And now, while I could say that there are minor differences between like Methodists and Baptists or Presbyterians, or, you know, your basic family of Protestant religions versus, you know, your Catholicism and your Orthodox, like your Eastern Orthodox, like they're much more similar to each other than they are different. And then you can cut into Mormonism, which is still like a further fork off of Protestant Christianity, and they believe some fundamentally different things about like the nature of the Messiah and his relationship to the Father and to Satan and some of these other things too. So we got all these things where you have all these people that make a really strong push toward here's why we're the people of God, and here's why we love the Creator, and here's how we intend to either get to heaven or bring heaven here, or come together, reunite with the sovereign. And, you know, like there's different goals for these different forks of the faiths as well. But ultimately, we have seen that these variations on these religions can coexist for millennia. And sometimes they coexist peacefully, and sometimes they coexist by, frankly, killing each other. But ultimately, the world keeps turning. So I would be one of these people. I see myself as, you know, your sort of Orthodox Christianity, but I am myself a Protestant, and so it's complicated. I think that there are two basic ways to look at it. You can say there is a basket or a family of Christianity that I would say are true and valid versions of the faith, and some are not, and that's okay. And I could say the same thing about Bitcoin. While I would say that the one that makes the most sense to me is BSV, I also understand the basic arguments about why one may be more Bitcoin than the other. And I also, have considered the fact that until they're orphaned until every other thing is orphaned, that we essentially have 3 Bitcoins that are functioning out of consensus with each other. And they're all kind of, this is sort of like how the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, and the Church of England all sort of see themselves as like the rightful Catholic Church. And so there's a big penumbra of things that you could bring into that. But in short, I think BSV is Bitcoin, and that's my basic assumption. So do I have an update on Zach? I don't, actually. I was talking about this earlier today, and I wanted to reach out and see how Zach is doing, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So that's my last... unfortunately, that's I want to know, though, too. Mr. Ulbricht seems to be pro-Trump now without going into his innocence. What's your view on his actions? In a very basic sense, I think Ross did not deserve 2 life sentences, okay? I think he probably understood that what he was doing risked prison time, given that he was operating in a way that was likely to turn into sort of a dark web market. But to give him 2 life sentences, I think, was specifically to make an example out of him. Now, the question, was he the Dread Pirate Roberts? I think the answer is probably in some circumstances, yes, he was. And in other circumstances, no, he was not. And the fact that there's doubt about it, plus the fact that the FBI agent or agents that were investigating his case, also, we know they were corrupt. Personally, I would have thrown Ross's case out if I was the judge. The judge really, really didn't like Ross. The judge seemed to think that Ross was some kind of a kingpin, which is why he threw the book at him. And that's, kind of is what it is. So I think it is a generally good thing that he was pardoned, because I think the argument to be made that he created an eBay that just didn't have any rules is probably a fair way to frame what he did. But I also think he understood that there was risk to what he was doing. And I think a little bit of that is about political activism. And as somebody who was and is a political activist myself, I understand that there is a risk to me being a political activist. Like, my reputation is closely tied to lots of things that are contentious. And if the winds shift too far to one direction, I should expect to get nasty fallout for my behavior. And I think Ross probably understood that was a risk, and then also probably did not assume that the risk would be multiple life sentences. But it's one of those ones where ultimately I'm glad Ross is free. I believe in redemption and forgiveness, but I don't think that he was just a good boy either. So that's where I'm at on that. Let's take a couple more. I am attempted to. Okay, let's not take any more questions. We got a few more minutes here. If anything else pops up that seems interesting, we can take them. But I wanted to talk a little bit about my crazy weekend. For anybody interested. If you're not interested, well, sorry, you're listening anyways. But I had a very crazy. So I'm going to try to explain this without causing myself any problems. I had a persistent, malicious cyber attack lobbied against me over the weekend that kept me off of a stage where I wanted to talk about hijacking Bitcoin. Not the book per se, but talking about whether or not critics of Bitcoin Core get targeted both by means of cyber attack or social engineering or many other things to stop us from talking about what is ultimately our telling of the Bitcoin Civil War. And I was going to be speaking on stage at the Counterparty Conference. I was there with guys like, you know what, I'm not going to name any names, but the people that created the Counterparty Token Protocol in 2014 and 15, they were there to talk about like why on-chain data matters and tokens and, the manifestation of the exciting things about Bitcoin, all the things that Bitcoin's capable of. And there was quite a bit of talk about guys like Luke Jr. and Greg Maxwell and some of these people that stopped Bitcoin Core from becoming the thing where all of the crypto economy came to do all these cool things. And I was really excited to talk about it. But on Saturday, I received a message saying your phone number has been ported and my phone turned off. So somebody SIM swap attacked me, which is sort of a low tech attack to start. But the low tech attack essentially is, you call the mobile provider and you push to convince them that they are me, and they were able to port my phone number to another phone. Now, with that, they caused all kinds of other acts of terrorism. So it was something pretty intense. Now, I don't want to get into the details because I don't want to give anybody else any ideas or let the world know where else I may be vulnerable. But ultimately, nothing was stolen from me, largely because my stuff is pretty well segregated. I do keep things air gapped, cold storage, using cryptographic authentication on things rather than SMS authentication. So here's what saved me. Here's why I was not in bigger trouble. Now, I got no sleep over the weekend because I was ultimately fighting this person or group nonstop for the whole weekend. I think I slept about 4 hours all weekend, but I was kept off of stage. And I think that may have been the predicate for causing me issues. Like the fact that it didn't even seem like anybody even attempted to rob me of anything. It seemed like they just wanted to keep me busy and scared all weekend. And it's exactly the kind of thing that I was going to be talking about the history of, these kind of terrorist attacks against guys like Mike Hearn and some of these other people that had DDoS attacks against them and other things. And so I don't want to assume too much about, how important my words would be, but I also can't ignore the fact that it was just too coincidental, to have been what it was. But if I were to give a piece of advice, the reason that I did okay is I do not use SMS authentication for anything unless the provider gives me no other option. And even then, I usually deny it if I can. And so SMS authentication is when you log in and they want to send you a text message to prove that you're you. That is super dangerous because SIM swap attacks are quite easy to lobby against people, especially in the era of digital SIM. So you just need your cell phone provider to push a new SIM card to another phone, and then they're you as far as digital authentication is concerned. So what you should do instead is use a rotating cryptographic key version. So something like Microsoft Auth or Google Authenticator or Authy, or there's about half a dozen other good products where you write down keys just like you would write down Bitcoin keys, and you keep a backup that way, and you can reinstall those keys cryptographically onto a device for authentication. The fact that I did that stopped people from getting into all kinds of email accounts and a whole bunch of other stuff that I can see that they attempted to do. I also keep my network pretty well firewalled and stuff here at home, and but was able to see lots and lots of traffic trying to hit me there too. So pretty sophisticated attack my direction. They definitely made me lose sleep and have to fight some battles, but ultimately I think things are basically okay and working out. But I'm not all the way out of the woods yet either, because the mobile provider situation is really irritating, and I'm going to be working on that forthwithly. But yeah, pretty frustrating weekend, and stopped me from being on stage, which was something I was really excited to do because I haven't been on stage in a while, and I wanted to talk about the Bitcoin Civil War and the ways that people are censored from being able to talk. So so that's my that's my story here, and pretty frustrating, but it is now basically the top of the hour, and I would like to choose a comment of the day. So let's run the reel, and we'll put up the comment of the day immediately thereafter. Run it. Hey, Mr. David, if you could reach out to the Real CoinGeek account on X, we will send you to your hand cash account a full deck courtesy of Champions TCG, who has been so kind to sponsor the show. So everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for spending this hour with me. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you. And of course, the viewers, if you could like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, all that stuff, let our technocrat overlords know that you do indeed want to consume my content. I would really appreciate it. And, please peruse the CoinGeek site, peruse the stuff on social media, comment on my stuff. Let's be friends. So I really enjoy doing these, and that's why I'm here and having a good time. So just a reminder to my friends and my critics and the people who want to terrorize me. I really do want us to be good to each other. So please go out there, do some good in the world, be good to each other, send prayers out to the people you love and the people you hate. And let's find out how Zach's doing too. Zach, if you catch these, I love you, buddy. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to reach out and see how you're doing when I get off the air here too. So everybody, that's it. Wrapping up. Peace out. Ciao. Goodbye.